Everyone. Uh, Welcome to Creators Arena, brought to you by Creators of Product. Today, we are very lucky to have with us Nidhi Gurnani. She's the founding product manager of Workomo, which is which is a startup building something really interesting, which she'll be sharing with us today as well. She's been a PM and a founder for a lot of years. She has experience in working at various regions like India, Singapore, San Francisco, and now she's working out of Vancouver. And she's been very experienced working on MVPs. She has seen successes and failures both on building MVPs. So she's a great person to help us understand the nuances of MVPs that she's going to be talking about today. She's also a peer mentor at Women in Product and an active advisor for product managers and other creators across the world. Thank you everyone for joining us. Those who are joining from India and Indonesia and other places in the East, thanks for joining us late. And those who are joining us from West, thanks for joining very early. So, without taking much time, over to you, Nidhi. Thank you once again for taking out time to do this with us.
Yeah, thanks, Devakar. Thanks for the warm welcome, and thank you everyone for turning up on a Saturday night. I know we're not able to go outdoors, but still Saturday night is still Saturday night. So yeah, thanks everyone. So hey, Devakar, can I share my slides?
Yes, of course. Just a second. Bye
Yeah.
bye. Yeah, please try.
Cool. So let's get started. I will be talking about the MVP checklist, what it takes to build an MVP, how do you measure it, what are the things you prioritize while building it. So a quick introduction about myself, just to add to what Divakar also mentioned. I started my career as an engineer. Then 2 years later, I quit and started my own company. It was the best and the worst decision I could have taken at that point. That eventually turned me into a product person. So my entry into product management was actually through serendipity. After it was time for me to move on from my startup card bag, it was then that I realized that I was actually doing product management. And then I started looking out for more roles in that area. So after Cartbag, I worked with Our Village. It's a Singapore-based startup. I was the first employee, led the product, built MVPs, tested out, scaled up. Then consulted with a few early stage startups in Singapore and San Francisco. Then I was with Shiro's for a while last year, and now I'm working with Workomo. And I'll share more details about Workomo when in the process itself. I find it better that you relate to it when I can explain, when I can give you an example. So yeah, so without wasting more time, let's get into the discussion. So the first thing is the definition of an MVP. I know it seems a bit redundant to start with this question. Almost all of us know what an MVP means, but it's always helpful to sort of give back to the concept and just start from the very basics. We all know MVP is a minimum viable product. The definition comes from the lean startup definition that Eric Ries had given, where it's supposed to be a product with a minimum set of functionality, which would let you test out the viability of a product idea or of a business idea in the market amongst its intended customers. But over a period of time, in the last few years, as digital products, as software products have evolved and have matured, especially in experience, viability in terms of feature set, in terms of functionality, sort of doesn't hold true anymore. It doesn't give you the right guidance on what you should build and what you want to build. So a lot of people in the industry have come together to sort of rename this. It's actually not a minimum viable product anymore. It's a minimum valuable product. And if you look at it this way, today products are separated just on the basis of the core value that they provide. So one clear example is that we're using Zoom right now for this session. We also have Google Meets. We have Cisco, we have WebEx, we have all of these different platforms. It's just the value that Zoom provides for this kind of a session in terms of its user experience, in terms of its live streaming capabilities, in terms of its video transmission qualities. That value has much more significance over other products in the same area. So I think it makes more sense to sort of tone down our MVPs towards value rather than viability. So now that we've gotten this definition out of the way, so how to start building an MVP? I think this is the thing that everybody really wants to start talking about. What is it that I do before building an MVP? What is it that I do during building an MVP? What is the process? What are the steps? So I'm sure as product people, this cycle, this is all the more familiar to all of us. I mean, this is the bread and butter of us product managers. You build something, you measure its outcome, you measure its impact, and then you learn from the impact, and then you build it again, and so on and so forth. This is how good products evolve. This is how great products keep you always engaged, keep you captivated. But what happens when you don't have anything else built out yet, and it's not available for people to use or for people to experience? When you don't have anything else built out, you don't have anything else measured, and you don't have learnings yet. You have an idea, but you still have to do some things to get to this cycle. So the first logical step there is then you list out what do you want to build. So, for example, if I wanted to build a recipe sharing app product today, just looking at in the pandemic how people have been very creative with their cooking, they've gotten time to explore their hobbies. I just want to explore how do people share recipes. So, ideally, what people should do is not this, but this is the easiest thing to do. You immediately have an idea, you get down to listing what you want to build, and then you start iterating in this loop. What happens when you do this is essentially the gap between that idea and the what. There is something else there which you've missed out if you immediately jump to building. And it takes you much longer to figure out what are the learnings that you are getting, and even if those learnings are in the right direction. And the gap between that idea and what is actually why. Why are you building this? Why are you building it now? Who are you building it for? And why should they use it? So just to add to that, a little caveat there is that most of my experience has been in B2C, in consumer products. So some of the learnings might not be applicable to B2B. I mean, everything theoretically is applicable, but when the market differs, when the customer segment differs, then a lot of these practices change. So just take that with a pinch of salt if you are building a B2B product. So coming back to the why, unless and until you figured out the why, your what keeps on iterating in a never ending loop. You do not get the right guidance early on to be able to go in the right direction. So from there, the MVP that we have, the minimum viable product, actually the order of things that you would do to build an MVP is not in that order. It's basically VPM. You first find out what value are you trying to drive, and that value could be value to the user, value to your end customer, value to your business. Literally, there are only two values that you could drive as an outcome of a product. And what is increasingly becoming a norm for most digital products is value to the business is driven through value to the user. So at the end of the day, what you are building for, or what you are trying to build for, is value to your end customer. Once you figured out what is that value that you want to drive, that's when you start listing out, okay, this is the value that I want my user to derive out of whatever I'm building, and this is the product that should be able to achieve that goal. And then you minimize it. So I'll just take a moment here to spend on a case study from my experience at building Cardback. When we started Cardback, my co-founder and I, the earliest idea, the origination of everything was that we saw how digital payments were increasing. We saw how cards usage was increasing. and we wanted to make it very easy for people to use their digital payment mechanisms to make their shopping, to make their spending easier, to make checkouts easier, to make just seamlessly integrate into their life. So we missed this boat of why, and we immediately built a prototype for mobile checkout using cashless payments. So what that prototype did was you would just walk into a store, you would scan the barcode on your phone, buy that product on your phone, make that payment, and walk out of that store. This is exactly what Amazon Go is today in the Western world. But we're talking about 2011 in India, in Delhi. We built the prototype. We got lucky. We got connected to a few retail store managers. We got connected to a few higher ups in different chains, and we also started researching with users. We started talking to people, and we realized that this is not what people were looking for. When people thought of digital payments, when people thought of streamlining their life, simplifying their digital expenses, the first and the most prominent thing that came to their mind was that how do I save money? I have one credit card, I have a debit card, I have a wallet. That was the first thing that people wanted to do. That was the value that they wanted from something, from a product which was built on top of cards and which was built on top of wallets. So this is we learned this by iterating. We built prototypes, we tested it out, and then we learned this. But had we come to this conclusion way earlier in our journey, probably the gap between our product and value would have reduced in the first few months. So now I can share with you what Cardback used to do. Was It was the best way to pay. It would tell you what is your best way to pay out of your credit cards, debit cards, wallets, for any purchase that you were about to make. So we came to this best way to pay through iterating a lot on the MVP side of things. We could have avoided a few iterations if we would have reached the value a little bit earlier. So that brings us to the first point of the MVP checklist. Find out your whys before what's, and find out your value before you start defining your product. So the next and the most obvious question after this is how to find value. How do you define it? How do you find it? The easiest thing and the starting point for this is talking to people. When you have an idea, whether as a founder that you want to build a business on, or as a product manager, you want to launch a new product or a brand new groundbreaking feature, you have certain assumptions in your mind. And when you have these new ideas, you are at your creative best, and you're also the most optimistic. The way the cycle works in your mind is that this is what I think should be built. This is what I think people would really value, and that is when you start talking to people. It's not a problem being optimistic, but what happens is that if you haven't listed down your assumptions first before talking to people, you don't know that these are your assumptions. You take them as defined truths. So it's really important that when you're trying to find that value, you first list your assumptions and then you start talking to people immediately. I mean, there should be no gap between your idea and talking to people. It should always happen, and it never hurts. I mean, even when you have a scaled up product, when you have a platform which is reaching thousands of users, millions of users, talking to real people, talking to real users always comes back and gives you more real insights than anything else could ever do. One of the things that I really love in this process is, and I learned this by hit and trial. It's only recently that I got to know how to paraphrase this that I was experiencing. It's basically how Shreyas Toshi explained it in one of his tweets. He's a very senior product leader. He said, define a null hypothesis before you build your product. And a sensible null hypothesis for consumer products is that the user doesn't care about your product, doesn't have time to use it, and doesn't understand its purpose. It seems very counterintuitive coming from an optimistic frame of mind, right? If your user doesn't care about your product, why are you even building it? And that is the question that you have to answer through this process, through the process of finding value and through the process of defining value. It's very rare that today people will not have a solution to any problem. It might not be the most elegant solution. It might be a hack job, but they will have some solution, some workarounds to whatever problem you are trying to solve by your product. So it's always helpful if you assume that your end user's life is not going to get affected if you don't build this. With that in mind, it clears your head to ask the right sort of questions and to read between the lines of what people are saying when you start talking to them. So you list your assumptions, you talk to people, and more often than not, you will find yourself inverting your assumptions, and then you talk again, and the process continues. What I've observed in my experience building consumer products so far is typically for a new consumer product, in the very beginning of that cycle, you reach out to 40-50 people. These people could be from your personal network, if you're a founder, if you are a product manager and you're launching a new product for the same company in the same line of products, or you are building a new feature. These people would typically be your existing users or existing customers. Once you reach out to 40-50 people, you would hear back from 20. That's the typical ratio, especially in consumer products. For B2B, this ratio might be even lesser, because if you can't reach out to 40 enterprises to get their feedback. So your top line of the funnel is lesser. And then obviously, if you reach out to five, one would respond, and they would agree to talk with you. Once you hear back from these 20 people, then you start scheduling interviews and you start talking to them. Then you start understanding what is it that they're facing, and how is it that you could solve them. Does your idea fit into the problem that they are facing? Once you have these 20 interviews, you would start observing patterns around the time you've hit your 12th interview. So basically, when you've spoken to 60% of all the people that who agreed to speak with you, around this time, what happens is you have enough data to see some trends and some patterns emerging, in different user groups, in different cohorts. You might be able to link back to your interview one from your interview 12, and you would see that clusters are starting to get formed. There would be a cluster which would exhibit behavior A. There would be another cluster which would exhibit behavior A, but also behavior B. This is a very interesting time period because the number is so small, you still are running on qualitative analysis, not on quantitative. But it helps you, once you start see these patterns emerge, it helps you connect the dot backwards to your idea. And a typical thing that I usually do is after every five people I meet and after every five people I interview in this phase, I refresh my list of questions. This is very counterintuitive to the usual product advice we have for user research. Typically, when asked to do user research, we are always advised to stick to a structure, ask the same questions from everybody, and observe the patterns, observe the different answers people give to the same set of questions. While that is true in the later stages of product, but when you are building out something very new, you don't have a structure. People don't have this product. This doesn't exist. So you don't know how to structure it. So what you do is you talk to a person and you learn from them. You also observe their behavior. And from there on, it informs you to ask better questions from the next person. Because right now, when you're at zero, you don't have the right set of questions to ask. This process itself of talking to people will build your structure for the first couple of iterations of your MVP. So it's really critical to keep a keen mind and an open mind when you're talking to people, especially when you're building out something from scratch. So that brings us to the second point of the checklist. Talk to real people as soon as you can. Try and gather at least 10 to 12 patterns. At least that holds true for consumer side. For business side, these 10 to 12 might come down to two or three. depending on what is the industry that you're targeting and what is the size of the company that you're targeting as an end customer. So we have defined what is an MVP. We have defined how to get value. The next question, and the most logical one, is there anybody else out there who is trying to provide the same value to the end user? So it brings us to competitive analysis. At this stage, analyzing who you are competing with is actually counterintuitive. Because again, I would go back to the previous point that I was making. You, as in your product, it doesn't exist. So nobody knows about you. Nobody is your competition. You don't know anybody else. So you're actually not competing with who. You are competing with what. What is it that people are doing for which you have to build something better? And that what is typically user habits. What is it that a user is doing today to solve that problem? Is he or she using another product, or are they performing a set of actions which is not which is not productized, but it's just something that they do manually? And once you get to this frame of mind, once you get to this sort of understanding that you're not competing against established products, you are competing against the current user habits, it clears your head. Because at this stage, at the very early stage of product inception, you can't be bothered about competition. It really hampers your progress. So you just study what the user is doing. And as part of the user habits, if the user is using another product, that forms a part of your analysis, but it never drives it as a whole. Another important thing when you are studying user habits is to really focus on what they're doing right now versus what they say they want to do. Typically, as human beings, we are all optimistic by nature, and we overestimate our own capabilities a lot of times. So if you ask me today, do you want to eat healthy? Obviously, I do want to eat healthy. Did I eat healthy in the last week? I did not. So that definitely points to the fact that I will not eat healthy even today. That's another thing that we learned while building Cardbag is when you talk about a fintech product, when you talk about personal finance management to a certain degree, when we asked people what they wanted, they always wanted the sophisticated things. I want a monthly expense report. I want my annual savings report. I want an expense manager. And then we dug deeper into what they were actually doing. We asked them, are you maintaining these reports in an Excel sheet somewhere, or is it an email? None of that. What users were actually doing was they were scouting their bank emails to see what offers has their bank sent. They were browsing store websites to see what is the benefit of getting a loyalty card from a certain store, and they were redeeming their card points for flights. So they said they wanted monthly expense reports, but they were really not doing it. So it never made sense for us to build that, because what people were actually doing, we wanted to be a part of their life, not part of their ideal life. So that brings us to point number 3 on the checklist: study hacky and tacky user habits that are in action right now. That will tell you whether this person that you're speaking with will actually adopt your product or not. Um, Another lesson that I would share from Workomo is, and I would just give a little bit of context here, even though I don't have the slide. Workomo, we're building people insights. We would give you the most relevant and important insights about somebody you're just about to meet. So it works with your calendar, it sits on top of your meetings, and it gives you the right recommendations at the right time. What we also observed in Workomo is when initially we were doing our early user research, people said they wanted a CRM. I want to maintain all my relationships in one place. I want to be able to track them. I want to see what they're doing. When you go and ask them, where is it that you do these things right now? There is nowhere. Very few people maintain an Excel sheet, even fewer maintain an Airtable database. So if they're not maintaining a CRM, what would make them maintain it if I were to give a product? Instead, what they're doing as part of building their relationships and as part of maintaining their professional relationships and network is just reaching out to more people, just talking to more people. And when they talk to somebody, they really go back and study, okay, what did this person do in the last 6 months that I haven't met him or her? And if they're meeting somebody for the first time, they go and check some insights about that person's professional background, educational background. So it's really they're trying to find conversation points rather than maintaining what happened in the conversation. So in the value chain, we had value at number one, product at number two, and minimalization at number three. So we've sorted out how to find value, what are the practices to follow. So we come to how to spec this product out. Whenever you have an idea of a product, there is something very core that you want to build. For example, the earlier example that I was sharing of a recipe sharing app was the core was recipe sharing. And for the recipe sharing core, I need to be able to A, write a recipe or record it on video, and B, share it with people. That's the only core of that product. Other than that, you have some housekeeping functions because the products have become so evolved and so experiential. Like there are certain basic things that people now expect from products. So you would need to manage an account, you would need image and video support, you would need a profile, and those kinds of housekeeping general things which users have come to expect from any digital product. So once you list out your core and then you list out your housekeeping, you list everything down. You do not cut any functionality at this point. And I'll explain later why that is so. But it's really important to visualize your product as if it was live today and what all would you expect it to do. So at Workomo, this is what we did. Once we figured out the value that people are really deriving and the value that people are really seeking, we listed down, and this is for the V1 of the product, that, what all is it that people should be able to do. As a user, I should be able to view all the people I'm about to meet. I should be able to see all the top insights about these people. I should get reminded for meeting prep in time. I don't want to be reminded right at the moment of the meeting, right? Because if I'm meeting somebody, I at least want to know who that person is 10 minutes or 15 minutes before the meeting. Then after the meeting, I want to be able to record some notes. Not a high priority, but it's a good thing to have. And other than recording my notes about the meeting, I want to be able to capture some insights about that person. So this was the core that we listed out. And for housekeeping, it's the usual: creating your account, viewing your profile, logging out. And of course, because Workomo is so closely related with your meetings, calendar was a must. It was a housekeeping rather than a core for us. So that brings us to the fourth point in the checklist. List all features that you would visualize in a live product. If this was live right now, if this was a fully fleshed out product, if this is what you were using, what all would you want it to do for yourself or for the end user? Now that you have the entire product spec listed out, how do you make it minimal? This is the trickiest part. What happens in making a product minimal is sometimes priority focus gets shifted. You cut out the wrong things and you focus and you keep in the things that people don't really need at the moment. Also remember, this product doesn't exist. This is the first time you're building something like this and you're giving access to people. So what you then do is that the spec that you listed out, you start dividing it into different layers. So at the bottom is obviously your functionality layer. What is the core functional thing that your product does? Then comes reliability. How reliable it is, what do you need to do to build reliability in the system? So for a digital product, this reliability will just be, just having your server architecture sorted out, having your basic DevOps sorted out, having your front end and back end talk to each other, APIs, basic sanity. Then usability. This comes basic design. It should at least be usable. It's not wow at this point, but it should be clear. It should not be confusing. People should not get stuck on, okay, where do I click now? Where do I go? The navigation should be self-explanatory. And then comes the final layer on top, which is delight. After you've achieved all of these things, after you've made it functional, reliable, and usable, how do you delight this user for this problem that you're solving? Because until and unless you hit this layer of delight, you don't become loved. So your user doesn't have an emotional reaction until then. And it's very difficult to even judge the kind of insights that you get, whether they are valid or not, if your user is not be able to give you an emotional response. An emotional response could be just that they're extremely happy. They're like, okay, this really works, wow. And then they come back and say, I'm using this, can you give me something more? A different emotional response on the other end of the extreme would be, this really sucks, I hate it, I don't want to use it, I have no use for it. And that is also really helpful, because you know where do you stand in the scheme of things. What is tricky to figure out is basically when it's a mediocre reaction. People feel it's useful but they can't use it yet, but they don't hate it either. So if in the traditional ways of building MVPs, what earlier people would do is they would cut this pyramid at the bottom, so they would cut it horizontally. And when you cut it horizontally, you miss out on these, on the top two layers, which is your usability and your delight, your emotional response from the user. So it is always advisable to sort of slice this pyramid through top down instead of left to right. You have to build an experience with minimal set of features, not a list of features. You might have just two things in the product, you might have just one thing in the product, but that one thing should be an end to end experience, right from the time somebody comes to your website to the time they get the first experience, the onboarding experience, and then the value afterwards. It has to be an end to end journey, so that the user, one, is able to experience what you are trying to solve for him or for her, and two, it is the user is also able to sort of see through your vision as a product manager or as a founder in the product itself. So the best product hack is growing through products, growing, building loops inside your product. But you can't even test that out if you don't have the entire experience built in, if you don't have all the layers in it. So cut vertically through your pyramid, take a little bit of each. Do not build full functionality and completely ignore delight. Take little functionality, make it reliable, make it usable, and then add a moment of delight on top of it. So going back to the list of specs that I'd shared with respect to Workomo, what we did was we started slicing it out slowly and slowly. So at the end of our slicing, it looked like this. At the end of the first slicing, we started figuring out, okay, if we want to drive one value with this MVP today, what would that value be? So if I say the product is about people insights, then that value is insights. It's nothing else. So we slice out the notes, we slice out capturing insights about the person. We slice out reminders, because as of now, calendars send you reminders. We only focus on insights. What that does is it helps me tone down what I need to build. It helps me tone down my spec list. It also helps me really focus very hard from an engineering perspective, because now my engineering team is only focused on building a good data insights engine and nothing else. There is no extra stuff that they're working on. And then we apply the same philosophy and principles to our housekeeping specs as well. So of course it is important to create an account and to be able to link your calendar, but this is a product which is telling you about other people, right? So in the very basic first cut of it, why do you want to look at your profile? You don't have anything there, so we slice that out. And then again, because it's an MVP, so if you are unhappy with it or if it's not useful for you, what you would do immediately as a user is uninstall, which means you have not reached that state of mind where you would want to say log out and log in with another account. So we slice that out. I know it seems counterintuitive, but hear me out. When it's a brand new thing that you are giving to your users for the very first time, the only thing that they're trying to see is, one, does it work? And two, does it work for me? In response to your question one, does it work? If it doesn't work, if let's say they get an API error, if let's say they get They expected the calendar to pick 10 meetings and the calendar only picked 3 meetings. It immediately gets uninstalled. People do not give a second chance unless they are bought out into your vision or into your product. And that usually happens with your advisors, with your team members. It doesn't happen with an end user. So, which is why it is also really important to talk to people who are not vested in you, because that will give you a really honest, brutal view of is it really valuable that you're building. The second question is, does it work for me? It might be useful for someone else. If it doesn't work for me as a user, I will not spend much time on it, neither will you. So what people usually do is they just, and especially in the age of apps and extensions, downloadable software, they would just completely uninstall or delete it. They wouldn't want to try it out with another profile again unless they're vested in you. So for an end user, these things, even though they seem counterintuitive, at an MVP stage, they don't really matter. Another thing then we do after slicing the extra functionality out, it is add more constraints. Remember, we are driving one core value. So how can I really drill down that value? Because it brings more focus into my execution, and it also makes my discussion with an end user, a feedback discussion, more focused. So I add constraints. So from this, where I only am left with 2 points in the core functionality and 2 points in the bottom, I add constraints. So the first cut of our MVP would only show you all the people you're about to meet in unique one-on-one meetings only tomorrow, only that day, not a week, not 3 days, only tomorrow. And then again, also limit the number of insights. I would only show you as a product top 3 insights. If what I believe is top 3 is not helpful for you, anyway, you're not going to use it. And then in the housekeeping side of things, uh, can I ask you to link only one calendar right now? See if it provides value there. So now you see from this list to this list how much more focused it is and how much is it cutting across the layers. So when I have functionality, reliability, usability, and delight, the housekeeping part of it provides the base layer of functionality, being able to link a calendar, and then viewing people from one-on-one unique meetings is a part of my functionality. Then I work on my engineering, I make it reliable. Then I work on my design, I make at least this part usable. And then I add the top 3 insights, which I should show to end users as delight. That brings us to the final point of the MVP checklist. Draw your product pyramid and cut a delightful, usable slice across layers. Don't focus on only functionality. Get a part of little bit of design, get a little bit of experience going through your product. Otherwise, the insights that you will generate would not guide you in the right direction. Especially today, when we have more products being differentiated purely on the basis of experience. Once you've done this, once you've followed this checklist, lather, rinse, repeat at least for 20 seconds. So the thing is, till how long should you repeat this process, and how long does this go on? It goes on until you're able to fulfill one core promise. Build one thing, give it to the user, see how the user is behaving, see if they're adopting, see if it is becoming a part of their life the way you had imagined, see if it is becoming a part of life in a way you had not imagined, but it's still helpful for you. When you get that one thing going for you, that is when you realize that this process is working and you're moving in the right direction. That brings us to the end of this discussion, of this one-sided part of the discussion. So I would just to reiterate a few points. Your MVP is not one product. It's not a variation of a product. It's not an end goal. It's a system of iterations. It's a system of parallel processes which generate the right insights for you to work on. There is no start line and there is no finish line. You would intuitively, as a product person, come to know if you're moving in the right direction, if you are able to fulfill that one core promise through all these steps. On building on top of this, there is no such thing as the right MVP. MVP, again, it's a system, it's a process. A system cannot be right or wrong. A system is designed to take some input and give you some output. It's just the process. The process has to be right. The learnings have to be right. The people that you speak with have to be your intended customers, and they should be able to give you valuable feedback. And at the end, this system called minimum valuable product, it owns the problem, not the solution. This distinction is has to be made very clear in our heads, because more often than not, we quickly jump to devising a solution and sticking our guns to that solution. If you own the problem instead, then you are doing what is in the best interest of your user, of you as a product person, and of the business. Otherwise, the amount of and the depth of insights that you generate, they would just make you float around. They would neither be right nor be wrong, but they wouldn't have enough depth for you to keep building on top of them. So always own the problem in the MVP. Just clearly define the value that you're driving. The solution will always be an outcome of this system. Yeah, with that, let's open the floor. Interested to talk to some more people.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. It's so visible with all the passion that you have been telling all the stuff that you have done, how strongly you believe in the concept of MVP, which makes it two of us. So I'll jump on to the question. You can also open the chat and you'll see some questions that have come there. We'll just take them in the order. And the first question is from Shruti.
Yeah. Hi, Nidhi. Hi again. So, my question is, and it's because you've created a product yourself, and I am assuming you had a stakeholder that you were reporting to, even if you were the founder. So, do investors and other monetary stakeholders have a considerable influence on the MVP that you take live? Because at the end of the day, it's their money. If so, how do you navigate that? And are there any cases that you can share? I mean, shareable cases, not the confidential ones.
Yeah, no, that's a great question actually. And especially if you are a founder, you do have these stakeholders whom you are answerable to. Not answerable to, but basically you're just trying to build this thing out together with them.
Sure.
So the influence that they usually, a good investor will not try to influence your decision. That is one. What they will do is provide you the right kind of feedback and nudge you in the right direction. So one of the examples that I can share from my cardback journey is when we built out the first MVP, which was that mobile checkout system.
Mhm.
We did it with minimal user research, and we showcased it to one of the first people we brought on board as an advisor. He was a
Mhm.
head. He was one of the senior heads in Tata Trent. Tata Trent is it's basically the retail arm of Tata. It's that subsidiary which owns Chroma and the Tata Fashions and all of these things.
Mhm.
He got really excited about the prototype because he had been in retail for a long time, and he was very impressed with the technology. But in the end, he came back and said, "Do you know enough people who would be comfortable shopping on their smartphone right now?" So it
True.
wasn't that he was putting it down. He was asking the right questions from us as founders, as product people, so that we could dig deeper and try to find answers to these questions. So good investors, good advisors, good managers will always lead you in the direction of asking the right questions. They always leave you open ended with sort of advice, so that you do your own work in figuring out what is right and what is wrong.
Mhm.
But there are sometimes cases when it directly comes from somebody's experiences, or it's something that they've been doing for a long time and they have a very strong view on it. In
Mhm.
that case, what really helps is basically just trying to, one, treat them as an end user first and a stakeholder second.
Mhm.
That removes the pressure from the equation, from the conversation.
Mhm.
And then you can ask them sort of really, really digging questions. You can ask them questions about their user behavior. You can ask
Mhm.
them questions about if they have a strong opinion about something, where is this opinion coming from? Have they seen a pattern in other products? Have they seen a pattern in the industry? And for all you know, they might have had a lot of observations, which was just getting bundled and coming across to you as an opinion.
True,
So
true.
it's really important to think of them as users at that point, and go back into that zone where you are trying to unbundle the user habits.
Great. Thank you so much.
Rahul Borude. Rahul, you want to ask your question? We can't hear you. You're
Hello,
on
can you hear
mute.
me? Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, hi. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah, my question is, what is the difference between the MVP and prioritized solution? And uh, so, whenever we build a product, our mind just runs like we should add this, we should add this. I mean, I have a pretty bad experience in the past. I failed a couple of times building a product. How to concentrate, or how to just focus your mind to build right features. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, that's the trickiest part. So I think it's really important to first figure out that one core thing that that you should really give to the user, or that an end user or an end customer is really asking from you, which comes out in your conversations, which comes out in your user research, and just build just enough around that, uh, and give it to the user. The thing to There is no right answer to this question, but the thing to navigate it quickly without bloating your MVP is basically just getting it out in the hands of the user as soon as possible. Obviously, when you do that, you can't give them a half, I would not say half baked, but you can't give them something which is functionally broken, which then focuses you to think that, okay, if I want to give them this one thing, what is the bare minimum that I need to give them around this one thing, that will help them use this, and that will help them evaluate this for the one core thing that I'm promising them. So my answer to that, and my approach to that, would be just getting it out to an end customer as soon as possible, and try and do it. If you're not comfortable sharing a very small sort of iteration to everybody, then try and do it in batches. Give it to 5 people first, see how do they react, then give it to 5 more, then see how do they react. So you build as in parallel with your learnings. You talk to them, then you build. The two processes keep going in parallel, so that your execution doesn't hamper, and your customer feedback and your prioritization coming from the customer also keeps going on in parallel.
Yeah,
Thanks for
right.
answering that, Nidhi.
Thank you. And Nidhi, my one more question was, what is the difference between the MVP and prioritized solution?
MVP is really sort of, it's at the very beginning of a product's life cycle, right? MVP usually gets generated from an idea, whereas a prioritized solution gets generated when you have already done a lot of market research, a lot of user research. You have a solution, a fully fleshed out solution, and then you prioritize it in what needs to get to the market first versus later. Whereas MVP is more of a frame of mind. It's a mindset which is most effectively applicable at the beginning of a product's journey, and not at the later stages of market research and user research.
Okay, thank you.
Ankur, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Divakar. Thanks, Nidhi, for such an amazing session. Really informative. This question is actually from one of our users on YouTube. His name is Aryan. He wants to know how to ask the right questions while interviewing people by removing out the answer bias that people usually have.
That's a great question. I face this all the time, because we all have our inherent biases, and we're all sort of accustomed to think in a certain way and process information in a certain way. The only way to get better at this is, I feel, is by experience. The more people you talk with, the more people you interview, the more patterns you start to see emerging. And then you can figure out if you think in a certain way and you have a certain bias, and 10 other people are saying something completely different, then probably the bias lies within you. Versus when you see patterns emerging where one or two people, one or two of your users are sort of anomalies in the whole universe of your user research, then probably there is a certain bias in there. But it doesn't stop there. You have to sort of constantly work on identifying those biases. Once you have to also constantly add the backgrounds of your users while you're doing this, especially when in the early stages of building an MVP. For example, for Workomo, if I were to ask if I were to do my user research with investors versus founders versus engineers, I would get completely different results. So I have to take that into account, and their backgrounds and their shared experiences and their stage of life, to be able to even identify any biases. And the only thing to which helps in overcoming that, in identifying biases, whether they are your own or whether they are user biases, is just talking to more people. There is no sort of hard and fast rule to this. The more people you talk to, the more human behavior you understand.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Nidhi.
Yeah.
Bharat, you want to ask a question? Bharat, we can't hear you. So Bharat's question is that shouldn't a product nudge them towards what they should be doing rather than replicating what they are currently doing? I'm not very sure if I understand the question completely, but you want to take a try?
Yeah, I think what he is probably referring to is this part where I was talking about studying the current user habits. And the answer to this question is actually, the product is not replicating these current user habits. The product is trying to understand what are the habits. Because if you don't understand what are they doing right now, how can you nudge them to go to the next step? So this process of sort of asking them about what they're currently doing is more to build background and depth to your product process. It's to understand what they're doing and why they are doing it, and only then can you figure out why is it that they're not doing that they should be doing. If you don't have the understanding of level 0, you can't build level 1 to nudge them, is what I've seen in my experience.
Fair. Nakul has an interesting question. Nakul, you want to ask?
Hi Nidhi, thank you for the session. My question is around scoping the MVP. You mentioned around making a list of features and having a few core features and then having some which are around housekeeping. I want to know that from the delight point of view, this is a very popular philosophy on the internet around doing things that don't scale, where you can do stuff manually in the beginning, stuff that is obviously not going to work at scale, to provide delight, to add delight, which your competitors or like other products in the category won't do. So how would you think about that? How did you go about that in Workomo? Any examples will be useful.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that theory. Whatever you can do at the early stage, whether or not it needs technology, it needs to be done. Because at the end of the day, if your end user is not delighted but by your product or by your product experience, then it's really not worth attempting that. So which is why I say, like, build experience, not features. When you do your when you cull out the list, when you cull out the fat from the list, you have to keep this top layer of delight in account. And as you asked, one of the things that we do at Workomo is, very early on we figured out that even if people don't know us, people don't know who the founder is, people don't know who the team is, if the founder himself sends personalized emails inviting every user with a special unique entry code just built for that user, and hand holding that person, the response that we get was almost 8x of what we would usually get if we were to just sort of send out blanket emails. That was the first thing that we did. So every day, So today we are still in closed beta. We are still not open access to the public, but we are giving access to almost 200 people every week. And these 200 emails, they go by hand every day. Our founder sits down, personalizes these emails. He studies the background of our users, and he emails them in a way which would resonate with them. And when reminder emails go out, when you have to remind people that, hey, you signed up for this, we gave you access, we would really love for you to try it out. Again, it's another round of personalized emails. So we did build out, and there are a lot of these tools out there for email marketing. We did build all of that out, but we realized that for the first 1,000 to 2,000 people that we bring on the platform, they would actually define our product. They would bring our product vision, our founder's vision to fruition. So it is really important for us to know who are all these people who are coming on board, and how can we be more helpful to them. This is one example that we are following in Workomo. Like, at least as of now, we are following it. We personalize every email, and we send a custom link for every user to sign up.
Thank you for this. One follow up, just on the same lines. When you said that in the housekeeping list, you kept the create account feature still, right?
Yeah.
I want to know why you thought about still keeping the onboarding features when you can onboard everyone yourself. Uh, won't it just like save your time if you just cut down on the onboarding features as well?
So onboarding features, what we really kept was it's just the bare minimum functional part that you really need to get done with to be able to use the core part of the feature. So, for example, if you could not link your calendar, and if I could not sort of show you that a little snippet of value, then you wouldn't really reach this stage of hitting the core,
Hmm.
and you wouldn't really. I would My entire onboarding is built to get you to this experiencing the core feature. So if I have to do something there manually, then I'll do that. If I have to do something, if I have to build a little bit of onboarding, because that's what you have come to expect from digital products, then I'll do that. But how quickly can I get you to experience that core? That is one. So the first priority is trying to keep it in the product itself, because this product is in usage. It's so simple that you really don't need somebody to handhold you through this. The second is that when you start giving it out to people who don't know you, who are actual real users, everyone might not give you a 15 minutes or 20 minutes from their week. So you have to optimize for those situations as well, so that even if you are not able to talk to them, is there something that you can do in the product that would at least still give them the same sort of nudging that you would do on a phone call personally. So this is where the create account and the housekeeping part of our feature set comes from. So our create account, our onboarding is literally just showing you how our Workomo Q card, we call our insightful cards Q cards. So it literally shows you how a Workomo Q card looks like. That's it. That's the only onboarding, because we need to tell you what you would experience once you have that meeting and once you actually view it in your live usage.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sharmil Shah, you want to ask your question?
Sure, Divakar. Thanks. Nidhi. Great content, great insights. I wanted to just put in the factor of constraints in this process. Somewhere I wasn't able to understand, if there was time, fund or, kind of people skill constraints.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? I know it's in a utopian world, this would be great, but if you had those, does anything change?
Yeah, obviously, these kinds of constraints change a lot of things that you do, which is why you try and keep this process as iterative as possible. So I can give you an example. If I were to start building a new product today as a founder, what I would do is actually just build a landing page and run it by people and see how they respond to that. And then if they respond to that landing page, then I would see, okay, now if I have some questions, if I would run a survey, how would they respond to that? So your MVP, it starts before the product actually takes shape in terms of feature set and functionality. And that the earliest iterations and the earliest processes they are built entirely around constraints. So if there is a constraint around skill set, you have to figure out what is it that people need, and then how do you do it. A great example that I know of personally is somebody who was a non-tech person and who wanted to just test out a product. So he used a lot of no-code tools. They are not paid. A lot of their basic tiers are free. You just put together like a very basic minimum usable product, but it still had all these elements of functionality, reliability, usability, and delight. And he was able to test that out. It was purely because he did not have the right skill set. He was not an engineer. He could not build it out, and he did not have the money as yet. He did not. It was not. He did not have a paying customer. He did not have any investment yet. So these constraints obviously sort of go into building around your MVP process. So, which is why you should keep it as lean and as iterative as possible. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that example helped. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add, I think the whole MVP framework trains the whole team to make the right trade-offs, because building any startup is essentially running into these things with constraints.
Yeah.
Even if you see the large startups also, there are always constraints, because the aspirations of most people who are building startups are so high that whatever resources that you have will always feel less. But yeah, great answer, Nidhi, on that. So Akshay Agnihotri, next question from you, please.
Yeah, hi Nidhi. Thank you for the amazing session. My question is regarding the go-to-market strategy. So basically, as in the end of the session, you said that we need to keep iterating till one core promise which we made to the customer is fulfilled. Now, my question is like usually what I understand by MVP is testing one or two core features of our product, and then you'll be adding another core feature in the next MVP. So is there a way, or in your practical experience, you have observed something which when after you have done your alpha and beta tests in the test market or the sample market, when you launch your product to the greater audience, I mean to the entire audience, some particular way you were able to actually got what you expected, what I mean, and something which didn't work in your go to market. So that is what my question is.
Yeah, that's transporting me back to cardback times and trying to recall what was the time when we figured out that this was working and we wanted to spend effort on that part of it. I think I can answer this by sharing that particular example. So when we once we realized the value was in helping people save money by optimizing their card transactions, the first thing that we did that we built was build like an exploratory sort of a product, exploratory sort of an app where people could just add their cards and just see what were all the benefits running on their cards. When we took it to market, and again, we didn't take it to market entirely. It was again in these iterations. We took it to say 40 people, and what we learned from that behavior was that it was nice to have, but people had a lot of constraints, had a lot of reservations around adding their cards in a new product because the conversation on security of cards and card transactions was not that high in 2012. So then what we did was we just found out a way to sort of link your cards without actually having access to any of your card details. So for example, you would just tell us that it is an HDFC, Regalia, MasterCard, and we would be able to give you 95% of all the benefits available on that card. We sort of figured out an easy way to do that. We did a dipstick. We built that. We saw if the conversion rate was increasing, if people were using it more, and immediately we saw almost like a 35% spike there. So you would to answer the first part of your question, there is no way to understand how many MVPs you need, but there is a way to understand if this current iteration is working or not, and if this core promise is working or not. So one of the indicators is, are people coming back to it on their own without you reminding them? They could be coming back to it daily or weekly or bi-weekly or monthly. So that's one strong indicator, because if somebody is remembering to use your product on their own, which means you gave some value to them, you fulfilled some core promise. The other good indicator of that is if people have started telling other people. So for example, if you got new signups, if you got new users, and you don't know where they came from, you don't know the source, you don't know if they came from a marketing campaign, or you don't know if you personally invited them. That's also a good indicator if such numbers are increasing, where users are coming from the sources that you don't know, and which basically means word of mouth is happening. These two things are they sort of give you a strong sense of whether this core promise is being fulfilled or not. And once you see that happening, either of the two things, then I think automatically your confidence increases. So if you had given it to 40 people, you would immediately want to give it to 100 people. And that is how once you give it to 100 people and you learn from there, I think that is around a good rough estimate for a consumer product. If you have these strong indicators coming in even from 100 people, 100 users, then I think you are ready to go to the market.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks, Nidhi.
Arpan Shah.
Yeah. Hi, Nidhi. Session was very good. Thanks for that. And my question is like how to build an MVP when there is also already solution is available in the market, but you are trying to do that like in a very better way. Even Divakar knows about our product. We have a session with him as well. So just want your opinion on that.
Yeah. I think in that case, what you would do is you would first figure out what is it that you are making better. What is that one or two or three things that you are making better? Because if you can't highlight that, then you can't explain that difference to an end customer, that why should they opt for your product versus the other ones available in the market. And at an early MVP stage, it really helps if you just focus on one or max two things to make better, and just make them almost 10x better, so that the visible difference to an end customer is really high, and they can immediately experience what advantages that you are offering. Because otherwise what happens is then in the users, you're just fighting for mind space in a user's mind.
Got it. That answers my question. Thank you.
So we have one last question. I think you briefly answered this as well, but Kiran Nair, you want to ask a question?
Hi, Nidhi. Thank you for the presentation. So my question is about, I think, yeah, you answered it a little bit. It's about using your experience on or opinion on using no-code tools to build an MVP.
Yeah. Big fan again. I am an engineer, so I am an engineer at my heart. So I still try to automate a lot of things, even in products. If engineering team is not free, I would do that. But recently, I've seen myself relying more and more on the tools that are available, on all these no-code tools, so that I don't have to build it on my own. Big fan of that. I think you should just get something out in the hand of your users as soon as you're possible. So if engineering is not your core skill, if you're not comfortable with it, if you're not comfortable building a reliable solution, absolutely go for it. Build something which people can use, build something which drives that core promise, and then just you would immediately start getting feedback on that.
Okay. Thank you, Nidhi. This has been exciting. This brings us to the end of the session. I request everybody to unmute and give Nidhi a big round of applause for all the great things that she has shared with us today. So can we have a round of applause for Nidhi? I already see a lot of unmuting happening.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been great speaking with you all.
Thank you so much, everyone, for taking out time on a Saturday evening to do this. And thank you so much, Nidhi, for doing this session with us.
Yep. Thanks, guys. And if anyone wants to just reach out, you can always reach out to me on Twitter. Most of the time I'm on there. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Good night.